In Los Angeles, Bert is actually a vampire hunter who kills vampires and sells their teeth for good money. Bert works as a pool cleaner. When the homeowners leave, he sneaks into a nearby house. He kills an old female and a young male vampire, takes their teeth, and drives away. Afterwards, Bert buys food for his daughter and drops her off at his ex-wife Jocelyn's house. There, he learns Jocelyn is struggling to afford their daughter Paige's education and dental treatment. Jocelyn plans to sell her house and move to Florida with Paige due to financial difficulties. Bert, worried about losing contact with his daughter, promises to come up with the money to cover Paige's expenses so they won't have to move. Jocelyn gives him until the next Monday to do so. Meanwhile, a vampire real estate agent named Audrey instructs another vampire to take action. When the other vampire defies Audrey, she punishes him by burying him alive in a newly built house. Meanwhile, Bert visits his friend Troy's shop to sell the vampire teeth he collected, but Troy offers him a low price. Troy suggests Bert sell the teeth to the Union, the official department for vampire hunters, from which Bert had recently been expelled. Desperate for money, Bert sells his expensive shoes and gun to Troy. Afterward, Bert receives a call from his daughter Paige, which strengthens his resolve to gather the money needed for her education and dental braces to avoid being separated from her. He calls his friend Big G for help. Meanwhile, Audrey learns about the vampires Bert killed. She investigates the scene, eventually determining that the same person was responsible for both murders. Audrey and her assistant decide to track down the killer. Audrey realizes her mistake and has changed significantly, but Ralph remains skeptical. He reminds her that Bert broke many Union rules and even endangered a fellow hunter's life during a hunt. After much persuasion, Ralph agrees to give Bert a trial period of 1 week. However, he assigns Bert to the day shift, which offers fewer earning opportunities compared to the night shift. Bert requests to be put on the night shift instead, where he has a better chance of making more money. Ralph doesn't agree to Bert's request for a night shift and instead assigns a company man to monitor him during hunts to ensure he doesn't break any rules. After meeting with Ralph, Bert goes to the Union's accounting department to sell the vampire teeth. There, he meets Seth, a clerk whom Ralph has tasked with accompanying Bert on his hunts. Though Seth feels unqualified for field work, Ralph promises him a promotion if he completes this task successfully, so Seth agrees to go with Bert. The next morning, Seth arrives at Bert's apartment. Bert tries to be friendly and offers him breakfast, but Seth declines and remains distant. On their way to the hunt, Bert asks Seth about vampires. Despite having no hunting experience, Seth is knowledgeable about vampires and knows the Union rules well. He shares information from his books, explaining that there are 5 types of vampires. Today, they will hunt juvenile vampires, who were turned at a young age and whose teeth are less valuable than those of other vampires. Determined to make money any way he can, Bert is willing to hunt any type of vampire. They head to Troy's shop, where Bert examines the old vampire teeth he has collected. Audrey asks Troy who sold him the vampire teeth, but Troy refuses to tell her. Audrey explains that humans once revered vampires like gods, and she wants to restore that respect. She works as a real estate agent to avoid breaking the law and to protect the vampires in the Los Angeles area. When Troy still refuses to give her any information, she kills him mercilessly. Meanwhile, Bert and Seth arrive at an abandoned bowling alley, a perfect hiding place for juvenile vampires. Bert tells Seth to wait in the car, but Seeger calls Seth, instructing him to stay with Bert and keep an eye on him. Seth, who has never seen a vampire hunt, is terrified as they enter the bowling alley. Bert skillfully kills all the vampires, causing Seth to wet himself in fear. Bert reassures Seth and takes him home, giving him a special yellow substance to apply to his body. This substance masks the human scent, preventing vampires from tracking him. When Bert returns to his car, he notices that Seth has forgotten his notebook. Bert starts reading Seth's notebook and then messages Jocelyn, letting her know he has arranged half the money and will get the rest soon. He asks her to be patient. At home, he meets a new tenant named Heather, who is a nurse. The next day, Bert picks Seth up and reads aloud from his notebook, which details how Bert broke several rules during the previous day's hunt. Seth admits he recorded everything but hasn't reported it to Ralph yet. Bert pleads with Seth for 2 more days to gather the money for his daughter, promising he won't mind being kicked out of the Union afterward. They go to Troy's pawn shop to buy necessary supplies but find Troy's dead body. On the table, Bert is written, likely by Troy after being tortured by Audrey. Seth wants to inform Ralph immediately, but Bert stops him. Bert explains that he joined the Union despite breaking rules repeatedly to earn money for his daughter Paige, so they wouldn't have to be separated. Seth feels sorry for Bert upon hearing this. Seth agrees not to report any rule breaking to Ralph until Monday. When Bert gets home, he sees Heather arguing with a man through the window of his apartment. The next day, Bert and Seth team up with the Nigerian brothers, famous vampire hunters who disguise themselves as stereo repairmen. Together, they plan an attack on a vampire den and agree to split the profits equally. Seth, once again overwhelmed by the sight of so many vampires, hides while the others fight bravely. They manage to kill all the vampires in the den. Afterward, Seth notices that different types of vampires were living together in the den, which is unusual. The Nigerian brothers explain that the vampires had discovered a sunscreen that allowed them to go out during the day. When they return home, Bert praises Seth for his improvement and notes that he has the qualities of a good hunter. Later, Bert takes Paige to a friend's birthday party. During the party, he receives a threatening message from Audrey, who warns him that she will kill him. Bert realizes that he and his family are in danger, so he quickly takes Paige and drives home. On the way, he notices some of Audrey's people following him. He asks Paige to put on headphones and play games on his iPad while he speeds up to lose the pursuers. Bert recognizes one of the men as the same person Heather had argued with the night before. When Bert reaches Jocelyn's house, he finds that Audrey has already captured Jocelyn. Audrey takes Jocelyn and Paige with her, leaving Bert behind. She expects that when Seth wakes up as a vampire, he will kill Bert. However, the newly turned vampire Seth is no match for Bert, who quickly gains the upper hand. Bert decapitates Seth, but Seth reattaches his head and survives. They both then head to Heather's house, suspecting she is working for Audrey. Upon arriving, they discover that Audrey has turned Heather into a vampire. Audrey forces Heather out of her house, and Heather complies reluctantly. Audrey's vendetta is driven by the fact that Bert killed her daughter, an old vampire. Audrey now plans to turn Paige into a vampire to exact revenge on Jocelyn, whom she intends to have Paige devour. She takes Paige to a sacred vampire site for this purpose. Meanwhile, Seth is trying to adapt to his new life as a vampire with Heather's guidance. Seth and Heather join forces to assist Bert in defeating Audrey. They locate Audrey's underground base, where they find numerous vampires, which overwhelms them. Seth had previously alerted Big J about the situation, and Big J arrives to support them. During the confrontation, Big J is bitten by a vampire but remains steadfast. He allows Bert to face Audrey alone while he uses a bomb to eliminate all the vampires. On the other side, Seth and Heather engage in a fierce battle with Audrey's bodyguard while Bert faces off against Audrey herself. During the intense fight, the bodyguard effortlessly catches Heather and Seth, but they manage to pull him towards them with great force, breaking both of his arms. Meanwhile, Bert uses his cunningness to outsmart Audrey. Despite her super strength and speed, he sets a fine silver wire in her path, and when Audrey moves swiftly towards him to attack, the wire cuts her neck, resulting in her immediate death. With Audrey defeated and all the vampires gone, Bert embraces Jocelyn and Paige. They are joined by Heather and Seth, whom Bert introduces to his family as good vampires. The scene shifts to the Union, where Ralph refrains from reporting Bert and Seth due to a certain reason. He accuses them of breaking numerous rules, but Seth defends Bert by pointing out the shortcomings in the rules, although Bert does not receive a promotion. As Bert and his family are heading home, they are surprised when Big J emerges from the main hall and appears before them. It turns out that Big J survived the bomb blast because he had become a vampire. Hey, if you're still watching the video, please don't forget to subscribe.